The 5 Strongman Foundations. This is how to build, maintain, and grow systems that are going to get you stronger, fitter, happier, healthier, and ultimately more successful. I've been obsessed with success in strongman, and it's led me to wonder certain things. What does it take to perform well? Why do extremely talented people not succeed? How do people with less talent rise to the top? What makes a consistent high performer? When we boil all of this down, the truth is that you do not perform to the level of your greatest strength, but instead the average of your foundations. There are people that come into the sport with insane levels of strength, where on paper, they're the strongest person. If you were to just look at their physical characteristics, they should win. Sometimes they have lots of advantages, like they have, a great high pain, low stress job, or they have a gym full of all the strongman equipment you could ever want, but they don't crack into the top level. They're not very successful as an athlete. And it is for this reason. So you have to take a full-scale, all-encompassing approach to have success in strongman. It is not just about your peak strength or your conditioning. To give you some insights on my journey and how I came to understand this. So in 2023, the official strongman games, I came in 4th place on the deadlift, but I was 19th overall. So here we are having some metrics among the very best in the world. My strength was capable, right? I also did very well on the moving events, but I didn't even come close to the finals. And really the biggest reason for that was, wow, these guys next to me, I realized it right away. They are so talented. They knew the right way to attack these things. Their pace was good. Their competitor IQ was just far beyond mine. And that came from having experience competing against the best. This was my first big level show, so I didn't have that. I spent the next year chasing the competitions, the best competitors I could find. So that was Strongman Corp Regional, USS Nationals, and then an OSG Regional, which ultimately, fast forward, took me to 9th overall. I cracked the finals. I became a more complete athlete. I knew what my goals were. So that year, while I was chasing competitions, I also dialed in my nutrition. I quit a lot of my vices. I quit smoking weed. I dedicated a lot more time to grounding, to getting sunlight, spending time in nature. So these are all things that were happening at once, right? This is a full-scale approach. I had my coaching in place, so my physical was moving right along, but then I had to increase and ramp up my nutrition. I had to make sure that I was focusing on the right things, because I'm distracted and stressed out. That's not good for your recovery, right? It's not good for your mental well-being or just your general lifestyle. So it was a full-scale approach. And each competition I did along the way, highlighted certain things. So I learned, improved, and moved along. Now, the 5 Strongman Foundations. We have physical preparation, weaponized nutrition, recovery, mindset, and competitor IQ. They all support the top layer that everybody sees. They all support the outcome, right? But when one is weak, it's going to hold you back. Your whole foundation is going to suffer if only one is no good. So sometimes you may have 4 of 5 really good, but one's lacking. So let's take recovery, for example. Let's say you had a great training program, you're strong. In sessions, you may be conditioned. Your food is good, but your recovery is terrible. What does that mean? That could mean all sorts of things, but it might be, you're abusing stimulants, or you get too bundled up in anxiety and nerves, right? Now, as we talk about this thing, I want you to remember that all of this is interconnected. So if I'm going to talk about recovery, I may say things like, you're not believing in yourself, which is a core tenet of mindset, but it's going to lead you to stress, both physical and mental, which affects your recovery. So if you're not sleeping well, if you're overstimulated at a competition, maybe you come out and smash the first two events, but then you're not going to be able to bounce back and come on strong for events 3, 4, 5. It's the game of strongman. So even if you have the best strength, the best food, if your recovery, again, this ties back to physical preparation, because you can influence this with the way you train. But if your recovery is not there, you're just not going to have this high level of success, or even a good, decent one. Or my favorite example is competitor IQ, right? Like if you have all these first 4 things in order, but you take the wrong strategy for an event, you make mistakes, your technique is terrible even though you're strong, then you're just not going to do well, right? I know people that I've competed against who are very strong, very fit. They have a very systematic approach to their training. They have, a boring life. I mean that respectfully, and their recovery is good, but they just make dumb mistakes in competition. This is a mix of mindset and competitor IQ, but they can't crack the highest levels for that reason. So we have to build all of them together. We have to. Just having a training program is not enough, but it is important. This is why I want it to be the first tenet, because obviously you have to have some sort of baseline level of strength in order to just do well, right? If you have a deadlift for reps at 405 and you can only deadlift 365, then you're just not going to do well. Doesn't matter how good your nutrition is, how good your recovery is, blah, blah, blah. Now, again, what's important is that having those will get you to that 405 deadlift faster. So we have to make sure that we're covering all bases. But back to physical preparation. Greater physical capacity reduces injury risk and improves recovery. Better movement quality and conditioning improves nutrient partitioning and adaptation. You may have not heard this before, but when you are leaner and have more muscle mass, you have several big advantages and things that will benefit your eating. One, when you are leaner and have more muscle mass, extra calories are more likely to go straight into muscle than fat. Okay, let's say that on the other end. If you are overweight and have high levels of body fat, if you have excess calories, they are more likely to be shifted into fat when you are gaining weight. So we want to make sure that our physical training is setting us up for success, not just in our short-term couple weeks or, a peak prep, but long-term. If we have good strength, the confidence that comes from that reinforces a stronger mindset. We can create examples and reasons to believe in ourselves because of the physical things we can do. And then finally, if we can do really well with strongman specific movements, then we're able to put it out all on the floor when it matters the most through experience, right? So physical preparation is the leader. And now a really good one. They're all good. They're all great because these are the things that matter. Everything else is just kind of nonsense. But moving on to weaponized nutrition, Proper nutrition drives recovery and adaptation. This is just so obvious, but people do not really quite value it. I think most people do not value this to the level that they should. You know, good nutrition is like the cornerstone of recovery, but it is a separate tenet because it's just a whole different field that has all these different benefits, right? Because you can train harder so you can improve your physical attributes, whether that's your strength, conditioning, or just body composition, right? Which again influences long-term growth of muscle mass and strength and conditioning. But when we do this right, we have stable energy that improves your emotional regulation and your mindset. So when we talk about things like competitor IQ, decision making, if you're a nervous wreck, right? Sometimes that is directly impacted by the types of food you eat. If you eat a bland chicken and rice diet with no micronutrients and very low nutritional value other than the macronutrients, which you do need, but you also need things like omega 3s and 6s to power your brain. You need some like CoQ10 for your heart health. You need vitamin A for liver health. There's all these things that we want to make sure every single piece of the system is operating at the highest level. So we can't just do a macronutrient diet. That might be the first step, but it can just be better than that. We can have every organ running at a very high level and high degree, which is going to give us a far greater outcome all through nutrition. But when we're getting into these, like I keep saying this one's real important. Well, they are. They're all important. Recovery is, for most people, I think more important than the physical preparation, than the training program. The reason for that is it's easy to go in. Like, who does not love to go in and hit their favorite workout? Who doesn't love to do, stones or deadlifts or log, whatever, man? We love training. Like, the gym is the most fun part of this, but you are limited to how hard you can train in a session, and then how often, and then how hard over just weeks and months and years by your recovery. This is one of the reasons why sleep is so important, because if you're getting good quality sleep, that is when the tissue and nervous system repair is happening, right? Like, if we go in and break down our muscles so that they grow back together stronger, most of that growth is happening in your sleep, those stages of deep sleep and REM sleep. I really recommend getting a tracker like a Whoop here to make sure that you are doing it. You don't have to be totally reliant on it. There are other ways you can tell if you're getting good recovery, but this is like kind of a, guarantee to make sure that you're doing that. But there's also things like skill enhancement that happen during your sleep, right? Like, REM sleep is a lot more nervous system and like motor learning based. So if you're trying to pick up, let's say, a new technique on a circus dumbbell, if you're not sleeping proficiently, then your literal neural pathways do not rewire to allow you to be successful at that. So we have to do it. Recovery enhances your mindset, your emotional control, and your resilience. Again, I keep talking about sleep, but it's bigger than that. We're talking about time in nature, the foods you eat to feel good, the attitudes you hold. If you are stressed out and anxious all day long, you're going to be in that sympathetic state, which just means the turned on state, where you're not recovering, where your body is running on high alert and continuing to be catabolic, breaking down tissues. This is why a practice such as meditation or breath work or prayer is so important, because that not only in the moment takes you into a recovery state, but also it gives you the ability to go from sympathetic on to parasympathetic, which is off, right? So we train and break down our muscles, but then we have to flip the switch and go into the parasympathetic off so that we can recover. But if you can't do that, and a lot of people cannot, this is tied into being overstimulated, your emotions, your energy, all of that. If you can't turn that off, then you're just like running hot over and over and over again. So we want to make sure that we're doing this through those practices so we can downshift after a session and we can downshift after an event in strongman. Because if we're starting our day at 9 a.m. and we are running hot from 9 to 5, like up, 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 we're just leaking energy all over the place, right? So recovery needs to be thought as, what can I do to maximize success on game day? And it is tools in the toolbox. So for me, breath work is one of the most important things, because that is something that I have trained to be able to shift into recovery, boom, right away, but also shift back up into turned on in a moment's notice without any caffeine, without any stimulants, just through the power of my mind and breath. Okay. So really important, but it's beyond the mental, of course, it's the physical. Like, are you doing things day in, day out that allow your physical body to recover? So this is 10,000 steps. This might be yoga or mobility or ice baths or sauna, right? Like, these are all things that tie together. And of course, the physical and the mental are always tied together. Always, always. That's why we have to take this overarching look at this. But the last thing we want to cover here is your recovery directly influences your ability to make decisions, especially under pressure. Okay. If you're able to bring yourself down a notch, then you can think clearly and make the right choices, especially if things go wrong. Our next foundation is mindset. This is the way you perceive yourself, your surroundings, and everything that's going on around you, right? So a strong mindset is something that's going to allow you to show up in training, your food plan, your recovery over and over and over again. Guys, there are days that I have zero motivation sometimes. Happens to the best, okay? It happens to the absolute best. But a strong mindset is going to allow you to show up because you believe that you are somebody that is going to get the work done no matter what. Mental resilience improves your recovery from stress and setbacks. Again, thinking about identity, thinking of your identity like, I am somebody who blank, that's going to allow you to continue to show up and push through those hard sessions. So are you somebody that's in it for the long term? Are you somebody that, these are all things that you got to think about. But you also need to be confident in yourself, right? And there's lots of layers to mindset. And as we continue to go through these lessons, like, we're going to get real clear on how to influence and impact these things. But I hope you're starting to see how this all ties together. I think one of the best things you can do to strengthen your mindset is to just take some actions consistently. If you follow your meal plan for 3 weeks straight, you have a whole body of evidence that you are somebody that can continue to follow your nutritional plan and get success, because by that time you will have some sort of change that you can look at and say, like, I have proof that I am going to get changes done. Love mindset. That's something that just belief in yourself is so unbelievably important. Bill Kazmaier, one of the greatest strength athletes in all of time, says, conceive, believe, achieve. And it is that simple, guys. It is that simple. You need to think about what it is you want to do. You have to believe in yourself to the highest degree possible, and then you just have to do it. Okay? Lastly is competition IQ. The reason that this is last is that this is kind of the final piece of the puzzle. All right. Like none of the other stuff matters if you don't have good competition IQ. As I said before, you could be the strongest one out there. You can be the most conditioned. You could have perfect nutrition. Your recovery could be elite. You could have the best recovery in the world. You could believe in yourself all of the way and then make mistakes that totally wreck your whole competition. Let's say you drop a sandbag 5 times in a row. Then you're not going to do very well. Or you're going in to strap up and you miss strap. And even though you've got the best deadlift on the planet, you miss it and it falls out of your hand. That doesn't matter. So by having high competition IQ, which mostly comes from experience, but let's get back to that, you can build an unbelievable foundation, because there's a lot of times when having smarts and intellect and clever ways to attack something is going to do better for you than, again, that stronger person. So you can get experience by watching strongman. You can get there by volunteering, judging, just being around and being active, because you'll probably, through enough exposure, you'll see something where you're like, oh, that's really smart. I should try that. Or sometimes you have niche rules in strongman and you don't really like do certain things all of the time, but let me tell you what I'm talking about. So, like for example, deadlift ladder, I saw Lucas Hatton using Versa grips, which are just CrossFit gymnastic grips, and he smoked a ladder. So then I used that when I had a deadlift ladder. What a great move, right? That allowed me to be real quick, real fast. Didn't have to like strap in all the way. I could just go whoop, grip, and rip, right? Help me smoke a deadlift ladder. And that's from just watching, right? So you can build IQ through watching it, experiencing it, also visualizing it, right? Like that ties into mindset as it ties into everything else. Because if you have a competition and it's working at a slow pace, you know how to fuel yourself and recover in between. But if it's going at a quick pace, you also then should understand this is how I need to mentally approach this, or whatever, right? So again, these all go hand in hand with each other. So that's the big takeaway, guys. Every foundation supports every other foundation. If you improve in one area, it will have a ripple effect through the whole system. Same with a detriment. If you decrease in one, it will pull back from the other. Weakness in one foundation eventually limits the entire ecosystem. So long-term performance means you have to strengthen all of it, not just one pillar. So here we have the rainforest of performance. There is a link to this right below. The image is right there. Down below, you can see it for yourself. But I just like this analogy because if you're thinking about a rainforest, the very top, the top of the canopy that emerges above, and gets the sunlight, directly affects everything through every layer. Right? Goes all the way down. But bottom up too. The roots, the ground floor directly impacts the very top and everything in between. So you have to think of yourself as this ecosystem of all of these foundations, because they all tie together. Again, this visual and all the slides are going to be right below here. So you have to just support yourself in every single way. Physical preparation, recovery, weaponized nutrition, because done right, nutrition is your weapon. Mindset, recovery, competitor IQ, and they all tie together, guys. Stronger ecosystem means a stronger athlete. Do not just be king of the jungle, be the entire jungle. If you lock these in, you are going to make gains and progress at a rate that you will not believe. It'll be just like absolutely shocking. I can't tell you. And this is also why some people break into the highest level and stay there. On the other end, you see some people get to like a world's strongest man level and they can't sustain it. They maybe have one or two good appearances and then they just like can't ever get back. It's because they're lacking in one of their foundations. So don't just be king of the jungle, be the entire jungle. Looking forward to getting into these things a lot deeper with you guys. Thanks for watching. Keep going through the courses, and we are going to get you anything that you want in Strongman, I promise.